everyone, to the Native American Archives section's 20 Years of NAAS interview series. This series features conversations with past section chairs, reflecting on their leadership and experiences. The Native American Archives section began in 2005, when archivists at the SAA annual meeting in New Orleans petitioned to form what was first called the Native American Archives Roundtable. On August 13, 2005, the SAA Council unanimously approved its creation, and David L. George Shongo Jr. became the first chair, helping launch a space dedicated to strengthening tribal archives and centering Indigenous voices in the archival profession. Over the years, the Roundtable grew in size and influence, eventually becoming the Native American Archives section, continuing its commitment to advocacy, education, and community. Through these interviews, we hope to honor that history and explore the stories of those who have guided us along the way. So, with that in mind, I would like to introduce our guest, past chair Dr. Diana Marsh. Dr. Diana Marsh is an assistant professor of archives and digital curation at the University of Maryland's College of Information Studies and an affiliate faculty member in anthropology. She is a co-PI of the Mellon-funded Indigenizing Archival Training Project, which is now moving into its next phase of funding and execution. Her research examines how new technologies and decolonizing movements are reshaping the ways heritage institutions share information with communities, with a focus on Indigenous access, discovery, and stewardship of archival collections. She has led projects at the American Philosophical Society and the Smithsonian's National Anthropological Archives, and her work has appeared in the American Archivist, Archival Science, and Archivaria. Dr. Marsh is also author of From Extinct Monsters to Deep Time. Welcome, Diana.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Did I miss anything there? Did we cover all the bases?
You are the voice of the NAAS profession, so we love it.
Wonderful. Of course. Well, just to get started, I was hoping to ask some questions touching on your background, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So, Diana, what would you say first drew you to archives and Indigenous cultural heritage? Were there any particular moments or specific mentors that shaped your path in this direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I often tell people I'm a recovering anthropologist. So, I started in anthropology, but as you heard from the book title, when I started, I got trained at University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and in the Museum of Anthropology there, which has long been a leader in First Nations collaborative work. But as a white person in the space, I really wasn't going to sort of focus on that as certainly not for my sort of like dissertation work at the time. So I was interested in sort of the anthropology of big bureaucratic institutions. And I was really interested in like sort of how you study white power in various institutions. And so I started by doing ethnography at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History and looking at the sort of production of big exhibitions for the public and sort of how that works and the sort of like internal politics and history of that. And so really it wasn't until I got a research assistantship with Ricky Punsalon, who I know you know very well,
Yes,
who was
indeed.
my first sort of mentor in archives, and started sort of getting schooled on archival studies as its own discipline. I had been a user of archives in like looking at some of these histories, but hadn't done as much of the sort of scholarship and like meta work in archives. And so that was my first sort of foray. And of course, Ricky was already doing a lot of important work looking at sort of archival diaspora and reunification of Philippine records and other sort of like colonial issues. And then after that, I basically had jobs at two very large colonial repositories, which is where I sort of kind of got into this work more wholeheartedly. So I first was at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, and that was right when they were forming their Center for Native and Indigenous Research. And Tim Powell there and Brian Carpenter, who were starting up the center, were doing a lot of community work. And I also worked on an exhibition where Rick Hill, who's a knowledge bearer leader at Six Nations and at Six Nations Polytechnic up there, was one of our advisors for an exhibit. It was the first time they were exhibiting Native materials from the collection. So we really tried to be contacting communities about the material and doing collaborative work. And Marge Bruchak was the other mentor and uh, advisor for that show, and she was at UPenn down the road. And yeah, so I'd say that, and also doing visits while I was there to Cherokee, where we're about to head next week, and also up
Yes,
to Six
indeed.
Nations. Uh, TJ Holland at Cherokee was a mentor there as well. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but we did a lot of sort of work with him. So yeah, I think that was the first time I was starting to think about like what could my role be as a white person in this space? Like what are the needs and what are the things I could be doing that would be useful and helpful. And then I was at the National Anthropological Archives at Smithsonian for 3 years after that, and did a stint helping run the reading room. And then for a little while, I was the acting reference archivist when we lost our reference archivist, and did a lot of hosting communities and just seeing how difficult it was for communities to get access to their stuff and find their material. And so that's kind of where I've ended up focusing my energy.
Understandable. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That sounds like such a wealth of experience and a broadening of your network with all these different mentors that were coming in, providing different outlooks to help shape that for you. Um, and really a breadth as well of experiences across the different slices of the field between, it sounds like, ethnography, of course, anthropology, archives, thinking on all of those different kind of facets within the field. How would you say that your experiences in those areas have informed your perspective on specifically Indigenous archival practice?
Yeah, so I think it's been really helpful in the sense that, I feel like I'm an expert in how PWI, like, kind of colonial
Uh-huh.
institutions do things. And
Mhm.
things are extraordinarily siloed, right? In terms of like the niches of different academic disciplines, therefore the niches of different best practices in all of these various fields. And then also the way that the collections, when they've come into these repositories, have been sliced and diced up into these different
Mhm.
departments and collections management systems and whole different ways of doing things. And so I think my various backgrounds, having come from kind of anthropology and museums, having sometimes dabbled, I'd say, with archaeologists and archaeology, and then having come really into doing archives, and then now being in an information college where I work closely with librarian faculty as well. I feel like it's helped me to see the siloing, which is one of those barriers that communities and sort of like Indigenous access always sort of butts up against. Um,
Mhm.
so I think it helps to see the ways that we need to all work together more and need to help like sort of cross those boundaries as much as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I too am now working in a larger institution for the first time and have begun experiencing the siloification, the various departments, the lack of communication within. And so thinking about all of that, I'm also considering the topic of, decolonizing the archive and how that frequently comes into conversation there. So what would you say that, this concept of decolonizing the archives means in practice for you? Are there any examples that come to mind for you from your work?
Yeah, so I think I've come around to I think I first heard at ATOM someone say maybe in 2015, like I'm not going to use the D word, right? Because like,
Mhm.
fundamentally
Mhm.
these are colonial museums and archives as we know them in the Western context are colonial inventions with
Mhm.
colonial pasts and, colonial legacies. And so um, I'm not sure we can decolonize them, but I think we can do as much as we can to indigenize them, repair them, restore them,
Mhm.
intervene in various ways. And so a lot of the work that I do looks at either the systems, like so the systems could be search systems, cataloging systems, descriptive standards, like what are the sort of interventions we can make in how information is organized, how you search information, how you represent Indigenous information, and the sort of colonial legacies you were constantly combating in that sphere. Or what institutional levers can we pull or push? Like, what are the ways we can change how institutions work, who works in them, what are the policies and frameworks or even legal frameworks that they're beholden to? Like, what are all those different sort of institutional cultural levers that we have access to? And so those are kind of the two main arenas where I spend my time.
Understandable. Yeah. No, when we're thinking about, I guess, indigenizing then more in those instances and considering what types of interventions we can make within these broader systems, uh, I guess I try to think about, like what's one goal in particular for myself? Like what's most meaningful and where can I direct my energy? And it sounds like you've
Yeah.
had like a couple there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a high energy person, as people know, probably at this
Uh-huh.
point. So I tend to have like a bunch of different pots on the stove at once, and like trying to kind of make those interventions in various points and ways through different projects. I think at present, the things I'm most excited about are the Indigenizing archival training project that we have that you mentioned in the intro, with started out just with Society of American Archivists and with our Native American Archive section. We're now partnering with IAIA and doing, going to have that kind of going in two tracks. So one being focused on tribal archival training and making sure that community archivists have the resources they need to support their community and to support different archiving initiatives. And the other track, which I think is where I can take some more leadership in some ways, is we've got a track with the Society of American Archivists, which is going to be an Indigenous archival stewardship certificate. And the idea there is to actually have a full set of curricular modules in line with the other certificates that the Society of American Archivists runs. And to have archivists who are not Indigenous and working in non-Indigenous institutions get formal training in how to do kind of cultural care and best practices for Indigenous collections, which inevitably they have. And so trying to make that more part of the professional standards. So that's one arena. On the sort of system side, I'm doing two different projects that relate to linked data and description. So one is the Indigenizing SNAC project, which is a project looking at SNAC, which is a discovery tool for collections. And we shouldn't, one of the things we've been talking about actually is that this is one of those common archival terms, discovery, that actually in the Indigenous context is super problematic. So we should probably stop using it, even though I just did. So it's basically a tool for searching collections, and was built to do, more like searching across, where are all the papers of Walt Whitman? And so we've been trying to wrangle that system to see if it could be used for doing more community-oriented searching and seeing like, where are all the Kiowa materials or, et cetera, which also includes a lot of work on how might you do reparative description, as we call it in archives, in a more scalable way, which is tricky. And then doing a project on linked data, which is sort of the other side of the coin, and sort of thinking about like, how could we use linked data technologies and reorienting a lot of the data we already have out in the world to be better suited for Indigenous search.
Of course. Yeah, well, those are a pair of really exciting arenas, clearly. Um, I want to touch back as well, as you were, discussing being involved in a variety of different things, of course. So touching on specifically your leadership experience and involvement within NAAS. So during your time as NAAS chair, I mean, these two between IIT and SNAC are some really exciting projects to be involved in right now. Are there any accomplishments from your time as chair of NAAS that you're similarly still excited about, proud of?
Yeah, definitely. So
Mhm.
For my NAAS background, I will say, so Caitlin Haynes was chair when we worked together at the National Anthropological Archives at the Smithsonian at that time, and she encouraged me to self-nominate. I think they were having trouble finding someone who wanted to do vice chair.
Mhm.
And yeah, so when I came into the section, I will say it was a majority, if not almost entirely, non-Indigenous group.
Mm.
I think at the time, Stephen Curley might have been the only Indigenous member of the group. And so one of the things we spent a bunch of time that year on were the scholarship applications and scholarship fund that we advocated for through the sort of higher level Society of American Archivists. And I do believe that the fact that Ricky Punsalon was on SA Council at that time
Mhm.
probably helped us because we had an
Mm.
advocate on council. And so we were able to, yeah, we were able to successfully advocate for scholarships.
Mhm.
And that year, we recruited in a number of members, including Selena Ortega-Scalera, who has been like our most
Mm.
amazing leader in the section. And I think it was one of our first, I'd say, more concerted efforts to just do more active, thoughtful recruiting for getting Native folks to actually put their volunteer efforts into this thing, and to overcome some of those barriers, like the costs of SA membership and all of that. So that was one thing I think that was a really good move. And I know we've done a lot of work, and our leadership now has done a lot of work to
Mhm.
reinstate those and then sustain those. Another thing was that the year I was chair, we contributed to what felt like at the time, a little bit of a silly bureaucratic exercise. SAA had released its DEIA work plan. And so all the chairs of the sections were asked to comment. And we wrote a very detailed, very strongly worded response
Mm.
about all the issues that SAA had. And actually, one of the issues we pointed out was
Mhm.
around repatriation, that there was a big
Mm.
gap in repatriation policy for archives, that it's something that's often overlooked or not included in NAGPRA, and et cetera, et cetera. And that started the conversation and got council's attention, which resulted in creating the Archival Repatriation Committee, which
Right.
has now, as you know, having been part of
Mhm.
that, and now having passed those principles for archival repatriation just this August. I think that was
Yes, I know.
yeah,
Mhm.
the fine art. So I'm
Mhm.
super jazzed that we were able, I feel like that was something that kind of set the ball rolling,
Mm.
um, that has been really great. And then I think the last thing was that Selena Ortega-Scalera, who's been my partner in crime now for many years on so many projects,
Mm.
came in as vice chair. And we really together, I think, but really it was her leadership, I think, that
Mm.
um, shifted how we were thinking about the role of the Native American Archive section from one that was really just geared at non-Indigenous archivists and training them to, doing kind of what are the protocols, and just, advocating for the protocols, to doing more community-oriented work and trying to focus on community archivists and just Indigenous representation in the field. And I think that shift in emphasis, and also having Selena's just incredible sort of charisma and energy in the section, really shifted the direction.
Thank you. That's really a wealth there. I sincerely appreciate that. I think as we're wrapping up here, um, one last thought that I want to have you leave with us would be, what emerging directions in Indigenous archival practice are currently giving you the most hope for the future?
Yeah, I think the a sort of explosion in community archiving, and just all of the energy and leadership from so many Indigenous um, archivists and librarians and museum folks is really exciting. I think the passage of Pinar is actually like a huge thing. I think like,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know, it's still striking that the protocols for Native American archival materials took 12 years for the Society of American Archivists to endorse. And we brought those forward, and thanks to, in part, of course, to Ricky's leadership and to that whole committee, which you were part of, and all the listening we did and all the work we did around that, and having kind of gone through SAA to do it, it passed with like almost no questions asked unanimously, and is now a standard for the profession. And so I think like it's very exciting to see the shift in attitude that something like that can kind of come forward and be moved forward, um, and that is assumed to be something that we should care about, and that is a
Mhm.
priority. So I think there's just a lot of despite the quote unquote headwinds around us, I think there is a lot of momentum that's happening, and especially in sort of a grassroots way. And
Mm.
again, the current leadership of NAAS is just been so outstanding. And it's now really, truly a majority Native and Native run section, and just such a powerhouse. So I'm really so excited to see what comes next for the section.
Thank you. And of course, we are as well. Uh, well, I'd like to thank you again, Diana, for joining us today to share some of your experiences with us. And I'd also like to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. And you can join us not only in the session now, but of course on the NAS microsite, where you can learn more about the Native American Archive section. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, or become part of our community as well on Discord. We'll be sharing links to all of the above in our show notes. Thank you again. Have a great day.